When your wife whispers another man's name in her sleep, you might dismiss it as coincidence. But when she does it for the third time, you realize something is deeply wrong. I always believed that life with Christa was unfolding perfectly. We met at a charity run in Boston 6 years ago, got married 2 years later, and everything seemed to be falling into place. I'm Eric, and I worked as a biologist at the research laboratory of the University of Massachusetts Medical School, studying plant genetics and their adaptation to climate change. Christa was a business analyst at a major tech company specializing in corporate solutions development. We lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Worcester, not far from Elm Park, where I walked our Labrador Max every morning. The apartment had large windows overlooking the park, and in the mornings when the sun's rays broke through the autumn foliage, our home filled with warm golden light. I loved those moments, waking up early, making coffee, watching Max stretch and yawn, ready for his morning walk. Christa usually slept longer. Her work often kept her at the computer until late at night, analyzing data and preparing reports for clients. Our daily routine seemed stable and predictable. I would leave for the lab around 8 in the morning, spend the day among microscopes and plant samples, return home around 6. Christa worked a more flexible schedule, sometimes from home, sometimes from the office depending on project needs. We tried to have dinner together, discussing our days, planning weekends. Max was our shared joy. We got him as a puppy 3 years ago from a shelter in Springfield. He was a clumsy golden Labrador ball who immediately won our hearts. Christa insisted we name him Max after her grandfather, and I agreed. The dog grew into a loyal friend who greeted me at the door with such enthusiasm as if I'd been gone for years, not just 9 hours. Last fall, when leaves on trees near Quinsigamond Lake began turning yellow, I noticed the first changes. Christa started staying late at work more often, citing new projects and deadlines. She became less attentive during our shared evenings when we usually watched movies or cooked dinner together. Her phone transformed into a sacred relic. She kept it constantly with her, even when going to the bathroom. At first, I attributed it to stress. Her company was going through restructuring, new management had arrived, and everyone was tense about potential layoffs. I tried to be understanding and supportive. I took on more household chores, walked Max more often, tried not to burden her with my own work problems. But the changes continued. Christa became more distant, as if her thoughts were always somewhere else. When I asked how her day went, she answered in monosyllables, fine, normal, tired. Our conversations, once lively and engaging, turned into brief exchanges of practical information. Who would buy groceries, when to pay bills, whether Max needed new food. The first thing that truly alerted me was that dream. Sebastian. She whispered one night and I woke up. Who was Sebastian? We didn't have any acquaintances with that name. At least that's what I thought. I lay in the darkness, listening to her steady breathing, trying to remember if she'd ever mentioned that name. Maybe it was a new colleague? A client? A character from a TV show? I tried to convince myself it meant nothing. People dream about random things all the time. A week later it happened again. We were sleeping and around 3 in the morning she murmured, Sebastian? Yes. Her voice sounded different, tender, intimate. My heart started pounding. I carefully turned toward her, but she was sleeping, a slight smile on her lips. The next morning I decided to ask casually, you were talking in your sleep last night? Mentioned someone named Sebastian. Do we know anyone by that name? She froze for a second, then quickly recovered. Sebastian? No idea. Maybe someone from a dream. I don't remember. Her answer was too quick, too defensive. I felt my stomach tighten but decided not to press. Not yet. The third time happened 2 weeks later. Again that name, spoken with such tenderness that I felt physically ill. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night, lying beside her and staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. One October morning, when Christa was rushing to work, she forgot her tablet on the kitchen table. I wasn't planning to spy, but when the screen lit up with a notification, I involuntarily glanced. Can't wait for our next meeting, someone named Sebastian wrote. My heart stopped. I stood over the tablet, coffee cup frozen in my hand. Max approached and looked at me questioningly, sensing my tension. Should I open it? That would be a violation of privacy. But that message, those words, they weren't written by a colleague or business partner. I opened the tablet. The password was our wedding date, ironically, wasn't it? And what I saw turned my world upside down. The correspondence had been going on for months. Romantic messages, photos, meeting plans. But the worst was yet to come. I scrolled through the messages, my hands trembling. I miss your touch. Last weekend was magical. I've never felt this way before. Each phrase was like a knife to my heart. But I forced myself to keep reading to see the full picture. I found hotel booking on the Hawaiian Islands, a 5-star resort on the Oahu coast, a room for 2 for 10 days in October. Right when Christa supposedly went to a corporate conference in San Francisco. Cost over $4,000. From our joint account. I sat at the table trying to process the information. Max came over and put his head on my lap as if sensing my condition. I needed evidence. Real, irrefutable evidence. The tablet had more. Photos from their previous meetings, a restaurant in Providence, a hotel in New York, a beach somewhere I didn't recognize. In the photos, Christa looked happy, radiant, the way she hadn't looked with me in months. I saved everything. Screenshots of messages, photos, booking confirmations. My scientific training kicked in, collect data, systematize, analyze. Emotions could wait, now I needed facts. When Christa returned home that evening, I acted normally. I cooked dinner, played with Max, asked about her day. She seemed surprised by my good mood but didn't ask questions. I watched her throughout the evening trying to understand, when did I lose her? When did we become strangers? That night, lying beside her, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her immediately. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scale of the betrayal. And I needed a plan. I called Tommy, my old friend from university who worked as an IT specialist at a cybersecurity company. We met that evening at a quiet bar on Shrewsbury Street. Tommy was one of those people you could trust with anything. We'd been friends since freshman year when we ended up as roommates in the dorm. He was a computer genius even then while I was buried in biology textbooks. Over the years, our friendship only grew stronger, despite us taking different career paths. Listen, I need your help, I began when the waiter brought us beer. I suspect Christa is cheating on me. Tommy frowned. You sure? That's a serious accusation. I told him everything, about the dreams, the messages, the hotel booking. He listened carefully, occasionally nodding. His face remained neutral, but I could see concern in his eyes. Okay. If she's using a shared email for bookings or payments or going through a joint account, I can extract metadata. It's not illegal, it's your account too. But are you ready to know the truth? I nodded. I had to know. There's one thing you should understand, Tommy said, leaning closer. Once you know for sure, you can't unknow it. Your marriage, whatever it was, will change forever. Even if you decide to work through it, that knowledge will always be there. Are you absolutely certain you want to go down this path? I'm already down this path, I replied. The only question is whether I'm walking in the dark or with a flashlight. He smiled sadly. Fair enough. Give me 2 days. I'll need access to your accounts and some technical details. Can you come by my place tomorrow after work? The next evening, I drove to Tommy's apartment in Auburn, a 20-minute drive from Worcester. He lived in a modest 1-bedroom place filled with computers, monitors, and various tech equipment. His girlfriend had long learned to navigate this technological labyrinth. So, he said, gesturing to a chair in front of one of the monitors. Let's see what we have. For the next 2 hours, Tommy worked his magic. He showed me how to access metadata from emails, how to trace financial transactions, how to retrieve deleted photos from cloud storage. It was fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Look at this, he pointed to the screen. She's been transferring money to a separate account. Small amounts, $200-300 at a time, so it wouldn't be noticeable. But over 6 months, it adds up to about $5,000. Where's that money going? Restaurants, hotels, flights. All paid from that separate account. Smart, actually. If you weren't looking specifically, you'd never notice. But we were looking specifically. And what we found was devastating. Christa had indeed been to Hawaii. But not for a conference. Photos showed her on the beach, in restaurants, by the pool with a man I'd never seen. Sebastian, tall, athletic, with a trendy haircut and a confident smile. Software developer from the same company where Christa worked. Tommy pulled up his social media profiles. Sebastian Rodriguez, 32, originally from California, moved to Massachusetts 3 years ago. His LinkedIn showed he'd been working at Christa's company for about a year. Professional photos, posts about coding, tech conferences. He looked successful, confident, exactly the type who would attract attention. But that wasn't all. Tommy discovered 3 more trips, to Providence for a weekend, to New York for a business meeting, and even a day trip to Cape Cod. All paid from the joint account or that separate one she'd created. In total, over $12,000 of my money spent on her affair. There's something else, Tommy said quietly. She's been planning to tell you. Look at this draft email from 3 weeks ago. He opened a document. Eric, we need to talk about our future. I don't think I can do this anymore. I've met someone who... The email was never sent. She'd written it, then deleted it, then wrote again. Multiple drafts, all unsent. She couldn't decide whether to leave or to keep living this double life. I sat in Tommy's apartment, reviewing the evidence he'd carefully systematized. The organized folders with screenshots, financial records, GPS data from photos. It was all there, irrefutable and devastating. "I'm sorry, man," Tommy said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "I really hoped I'd find nothing." "Me too." Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. I drove home in a daze. The streets of Worcester looked different somehow, as if I was seeing them through a new lens. The city where I'd built my life, where I'd planned my future with Christa, now felt foreign and cold. Max greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm. I sat on the floor and hugged him, burying my face in his fur. Dogs don't betray you. They don't lie. They don't spend your money on secret trips with their lovers. Max licked my face, concerned by my distress. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Christa, watching her sleep peacefully, and felt a mixture of pain, anger, and strangely enough, relief. At least now I knew the truth. But what struck me most was something else. I found correspondence between Christa and her colleague Patricia. In it she wrote, "Eric is a good man, but we're just on different wavelengths. Sebastian understands me, my ambitions, my desire for something more." Something more? I devoted 4 years of my life to her. I'd supported her career, celebrated her successes, planned our future. And all of this was worth less than attention from some programmer from her office? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just angry, enraged. I'd been loyal, faithful, supportive. I'd turned down a research position in California because she didn't want to move. I'd spent weekends helping her prepare presentations for work. I'd been there for her when her mother was sick, when she was stressed about work, when she needed anything. And this was how she repaid me? With lies, betrayal, and stealing our money to fund her affair? That night I made another decision. Simply accusing her and leaving would be too easy. Too predictable. She'd spent my money on her betrayal? Well, it was time to answer for it. The next morning I called my brother Larry. He lived in neighboring Leicester and worked as a manager at a local bank. I asked him for a favor, a safe place to store cash. "How much are you talking about?" he asked, surprised. 30,000, I replied. "I'll withdraw everything I can from the joint account before she realizes what's happening." Larry whistled. "That's serious." "You sure?" "More than sure." Larry was silent for a moment, then said, "Come by this evening. We'll figure something out. But Eric, be careful. If she finds out before you're ready..." "She won't find out. Not until it's too late." I developed a plan. First, I visited a jewelry store in downtown and purchased gold coins and platinum bars for $15,000. This was a smart investment. Precious metals aren't tracked on bank accounts and retain value. I divided the rest of the cash into several parts. One I gave to Larry, another I hid in a safety deposit box at a different bank, the third, in a safe in my laboratory. The lab was perfect for hiding things. I had a small office that I shared with another researcher, but she worked different hours and I often had the space to myself. The safe was built into the wall behind a cabinet. Hardly anyone knew it existed. Parallel to this, I contacted a lawyer. Not a public defender, but an experienced divorce specialist Tommy had recommended. We met at his office on Main Street. Robert Chin was a short, energetic man in his 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through you. His office was filled with law books and framed diplomas. He listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes. "You have good evidence." The lawyer nodded, reviewing the folder of materials. "Correspondence, financial documents, GPS data. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but this evidence will help with property division, especially if we can prove misuse of joint funds." "I want the apartment and the car," I said. "And I want her to get nothing from what I earned." "We'll see what we can do," he replied. "But you need to understand, judges don't like vindictiveness. We'll present this as protecting your assets from someone who's proven to be financially irresponsible. The emotional aspect is important, but the financial angle is what will win in court. Whatever works. There's another thing," he continued. "If you're planning to withdraw significant amounts from joint accounts, do it carefully. We need to document everything. Keep receipts, records, evidence that you're preserving assets, not hiding them. Otherwise, it could work against you in court." Over the next week, I methodically executed my plan. I withdrew cash in amounts that wouldn't trigger bank alerts, 2,000 here, 3,000 there, spread across several days. I bought the precious metals through a dealer who didn't ask questions. I opened a separate account at a different bank under my name only and transferred some funds there. All the while I acted normally at home. I cooked dinners, walked Max, asked Christa about her day. She seemed to relax, thinking whatever suspicions I might have had were gone. She even became more affectionate, perhaps feeling guilty, perhaps trying to maintain the facade. One evening she suggested we go out for dinner at a nice restaurant. We drove to a place in Shrewsbury, sat in a dimly lit corner, and she reached across the table to hold my hand. "I feel like we haven't been connecting lately," she said. "I want us to spend more time together." I looked at her, this woman I'd loved, who was lying to my face while probably texting Sebastian under the table. I smiled and squeezed her hand. I'd like that too. The irony was almost too much to bear. It was time for confrontation. I decided not to create drama. Instead, I chose a cold, rational approach. That evening, when Christa came home, I was sitting on the couch with a folder of documents. Max lay at my feet, watching her warily. Animals always sense tension. The apartment was quiet. I turned off the TV, put away my phone, created an environment where there would be no distractions, no escapes. "We need to talk," I said calmly. She tensed. "About what?" I opened the folder and laid out on the coffee table printed screenshots of correspondence, hotel receipts, bank statements. Page after page of evidence, organized chronologically, impossible to deny. About Sebastian. About Hawaii. About how much of my money you spent on your affair. The color drained from her face. She grabbed her phone, probably to text Sebastian, but I was faster. "Don't bother. He already knows." I sent copies of everything to his ex-girlfriend. Turns out he promised her something serious too. This was true. Tommy had helped me find Sebastian's ex-girlfriend's social media profile. They'd broken up just 3 months ago, and from correspondence with Christa, it was clear he hadn't told her. I sent the girl all the evidence, and she was no less shocked than I was. Her name was Jennifer, and when I contacted her through Facebook, she initially didn't believe me. But the evidence was overwhelming. Screenshots of Sebastian texting Christa while still with Jennifer. Photos from trips I now knew were taken during their breaks. Financial records showing he'd been supporting 2 relationships simultaneously. Jennifer had been devastated. But she'd also been grateful for the truth. And she'd been more than willing to forward all this information to mutual friends and colleagues at their company. "Eric, this isn't what you think," Christa began, but I raised my hand. "Don't. I know everything. 4 trips, $12,000, 6 months of lies. The lawyer is already preparing divorce papers. But we can talk about this. Maybe go to a therapist." I laughed, short and bitter. "A therapist? Christa, you spent my money on romantic getaways with another man. You lied to my face for months. You said his name in your sleep while I lay next to you. What exactly are we supposed to discuss? I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did. And you know what's saddest? I read your correspondence with Patricia. Eric is a good man, but even in your excuses you couldn't just be honest. You were looking for reasons why I wasn't enough for you." She tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Eric. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. 4 years together, that has to mean something." It did mean something. Past tense. You threw it away when you booked that first hotel room. When you lied about that first business trip. When you chose him over us. I chose wrong. I see that now. No, you chose to get caught. That's different. You'd still be lying to me if I hadn't found that tablet. You'd still be planning your next trip with Sebastian, using my money, sleeping in my bed, and pretending everything was fine. Max got up and moved away from Christa, coming to sit beside me instead. Even the dog knew. The next 2 weeks were hell. Christa tried to contact Sebastian, but he was ignoring her calls. His ex-girlfriend, having received the evidence, told all their mutual friends and colleagues. At the company where Christa and Sebastian worked, everyone knew about their affair. The atmosphere became unbearable. I learned about the fallout from Patricia, who, feeling guilty about knowing and not saying anything, reached out to me. We met for coffee and she told me everything. "The whole office is talking about it," Patricia said, stirring her latte nervously. "HR is conducting an investigation because they used company resources for personal matters. Sebastian's already being transferred to a different department. And Christa. People are avoiding her in the hallways. Did you know?" I asked directly. She looked down. I suspected. She mentioned Sebastian a lot, seemed happier when talking about work. But I never thought. I should have said something. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. She made her choices. There's something else you should know, Patricia continued. Sebastian's ex-girlfriend came to the office last week. Made quite a scene. Security had to escort her out. But not before she told anyone who would listen about what Sebastian and Christa did. Sebastian quickly backed down. He met with his ex, apologized, swore it was temporary weakness. The girl, surprisingly, gave him a second chance. And Christa was left alone, without a husband, without a lover, with a ruined reputation at work. My sister Elizabeth, who lived in Providence, came to support me. We sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and she listened to the whole story. Elizabeth was 3 years older than me, a high school teacher with 2 kids of her own. She'd always been protective of me even as adults. When I told her about Christa, her face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, sympathy. I always felt something was off about her, she admitted. Too cold, too focused on career. But I thought that was just her personality. Maybe I was blind, I replied. Ignored obvious signs. Don't blame yourself. You trusted her. That's normal in marriage. Trusted. Past tense. We talked for hours that day. Elizabeth told me about her own marriage, the challenges she and her husband faced, how they worked through difficult times. But she also emphasized that what Christa did was different. It wasn't about growing apart or communication issues. It was about betrayal and lies. You deserve better, she said firmly. You always have. And you'll find it again when you're ready. The divorce process took 3 months. My lawyer played brilliantly. Evidence of misuse of joint funds, emotional infidelity, lies, all of this was considered in property division. I got the apartment, the car, and most of the joint savings. Christa received financial compensation for her share of the apartment and her personal property. Max, of course, stayed with me. He'd always loved me more anyway. The proceedings were cold and formal. Christa's lawyer tried to argue she deserved more, that she'd contributed equally to the marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, made it clear she had little sympathy for someone who'd systematically deceived their spouse while using joint funds for an affair. Mrs. Anderson, the judge said during one hearing, you made choices that directly impacted the financial well-being of this marriage. You can't expect to benefit from a partnership you were actively betraying. Christa sat silently through most of the proceedings. Occasionally she'd try to catch my eye, but I looked away. There was nothing left to say. The worst thing for Christa wasn't the divorce itself. It was the isolation. Patricia, her colleague and friend, distanced herself when she learned the full truth. Other colleagues treated her with judgment. Sebastian returned to his ex-girlfriend and avoided any contact with Christa. She became a pariah in her own company. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard about her struggles. She'd arrive at work early and leave late, trying to avoid people. She'd eat lunch alone at her desk. Some colleagues would stop talking when she entered a room. The shame was visible and crushing. A month after the final signing of documents, I accidentally learned that Christa had quit her job. Couldn't handle the pressure, the atmosphere, the gossip. She moved in with her parents in Springfield, trying to start with a clean slate. Her parents, I later learned, were horrified by what she'd done. They'd always liked me, invited us for holidays, treated me like family. When they found out about the affair, they reportedly had a massive fight with Christa. Her father, a traditional man who valued loyalty above all else, barely spoke to her for weeks. I stayed in Worcester. Returned to my work at the lab where my colleagues supported me. Continued walking Max in the park, met with friends, gradually restored my life. The lab became my sanctuary. I threw myself into research, working longer hours, taking on additional projects. My supervisor noticed and appreciated the dedication, even offering me a lead position on a new grant project studying drought-resistant crops. You've really stepped up lately, Dr. Patricia Wilson told me one afternoon. Different Patricia, not Christa's colleague. I know you've been going through a difficult time personally, but your work hasn't suffered. If anything, it's improved. Work is the one thing that makes sense right now, I admitted. Plants don't lie. They don't cheat. They either survive or they don't, based on their genetics and environment. She smiled. That's a rather bleak view of relationships. Just a realistic one. Tommy asked me over beers one evening, do you regret anything? I thought about it. No. Maybe I regret the wasted time. But not what I did. She didn't just betray me, she betrayed trust, our shared home, our future. And used my money to do it. Some actions don't deserve forgiveness. You think she's learned her lesson? I think she learned that actions have consequences. Whether she's learned anything deeper, that's her problem now, not mine. Tommy raised his glass. To moving forward. To moving forward. Winter came early that year. Snow covered Worcester at the end of November, turning the city into a white, quiet landscape. I stood by the window of my apartment, now truly mine, with a cup of hot tea. Max slept on the couch, occasionally twitching his paws in dreams, probably chasing squirrels in the park. My life didn't end with this divorce. It just went a different direction. I wasn't the naive romantic I'd been 4 years ago. Now I knew that trust isn't a given but a privilege that needs to be earned and maintained every day. I started dating again casually. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and occasional dinners. It felt strange at first, getting to know new people, telling my story. Some women were sympathetic, others wary. Divorce always raises questions. I met one woman, Karen, at a coffee shop near the university. She was a veterinary technician, loved animals, had a great sense of humor. We went out a few times, and while there wasn't romantic chemistry, we became friends. She helped me realize I was ready to trust again, even if I wasn't ready to commit. Larry returned the cash I'd given him. The gold and platinum I decided to keep as an investment. Who knows, maybe someday they'd become the start of a new life, a new journey. Larry and his wife invited me for Thanksgiving that year. Their home was filled with warmth, family, and laughter. Everything I'd thought I had with Christa but realized was an illusion. Their kids ran around playing, and I found myself smiling genuinely for the first time in months. "You look better," Larry's wife mentioned while we were preparing dinner. "More at peace. I feel better." It's like I was carrying a weight I didn't know was there until it was gone. And Christa? I heard she was trying to get a new job, but reputation in their industry was everything. Especially in places like Worcester or Springfield, where everyone knows everyone. Sebastian and his girlfriend apparently even got engaged. The irony of fate. The news came through Elizabeth, who'd heard it from a mutual friend. Apparently, Christa had applied to several companies, but word had gotten around. The tech industry in Massachusetts was smaller than people thought, and stories traveled fast. She tried moving to Boston, hoping for a fresh start in a bigger city. But even there, her reputation preceded her. Someone from her old company had moved to a firm she'd applied to. The interview had gone well until they made a call to check references. I didn't rejoice in her misfortune. Just accepted it as fact. She'd made her choice, I'd made mine. Life continued. I wasn't glad about her suffering. I simply accepted it as a fact. She made her choice, I made mine. Life went on. Spring brought new opportunities. My lab received a grant for research and I dove headfirst into work. Found a new roommate for the second bedroom, a medical student who was quiet and neat. Max loved her immediately, which I considered a good sign. The roommate, Jessica, was a 25-year-old in her second year of medical school. She studied late into the night, kept to herself mostly, but was pleasant when we did interact. Sometimes we'd have coffee together in the morning before heading to our respective responsibilities. "You have a good setup here," she mentioned one morning watching Max play with his toy. "Peaceful. Stable. That's rare these days." "It wasn't always this way," I admitted. "But I've learned to appreciate what I have." One evening, walking Max by Lake Quinsigamond, I realized I was smiling. Just like that, for no reason. The lake sparkled under the spring sun, children played on the playground, couples sat on benches. Life was beautiful in its simplicity. The path around the lake was one of my favorite places in Worcester. In spring it came alive with colors, fresh green grass, blooming flowers, trees budding with new leaves. Families were everywhere, kids on bikes, people jogging, others just strolling and enjoying the weather. Max loved it too. He'd pull on the leash excitedly, wanting to greet every dog we passed, sniff every interesting smell. I'd let him, taking my time, in no hurry to get anywhere. These walks became meditative for me, time to think, reflect, just be present in the moment. I ran into Karen there sometimes and we'd walk together talking about everything and nothing. She was dating someone new, seemed happy. We'd laugh about our respective dating experiences, the awkwardness of starting over. "You know what I realized?" she said one day as we watched Max play with another dog. "The best revenge isn't making them suffer. Is building a life so good you forget they existed." Wise words. I learned them the hard way too. I was free. Not from relationships, but from lies, from a person who didn't value what we had. And that was the best revenge I could imagine, simply being happy without her. The anniversary of when I discovered the truth came and went. I marked it privately, allowing myself a moment to reflect on how far I'd come. A year ago I'd been devastated, angry, confused. Now I was stable, content, even optimistic about the future. Work continued to go well. The research project was yielding interesting results. and I'd even presented at a regional conference. My personal life was settling into a comfortable rhythm. I'd started taking guitar lessons, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Max was healthy and happy. The apartment felt like home, not like a reminder of what I'd lost. One Saturday afternoon, I was at the farmer's market near Elm Park when I saw her. Christa, standing by a vegetable stand, looking tired and older than I remembered. She was alone, holding a single bag of groceries. Our eyes met across the crowd. For a moment we just stared at each other. I waited for some feeling to emerge, anger, sadness, regret. But there was nothing. Just a mild curiosity about someone who used to be important but no longer was. She looked like she might approach, but I turned away and continued walking. Max, sensing my mood, stayed close. There was nothing to say, no closure needed that hadn't already been found. Later that week, Elizabeth called with news. Did you hear? Christa moved to Vermont. Got a job with some small consulting firm. Starting over completely. Good for her. You mean that? I mean, I don't care. She's not part of my life anymore. What she does, where she goes, none of my concern. That's healthy, actually. You've really moved on. And I had. The anger had faded, the pain had dulled. What remained was a clearer understanding of what I wanted from life, from relationships, from myself. I started volunteering at the animal shelter where we'd gotten Max, spending time with dogs waiting for homes, helping them find families. It was rewarding work, and I met good people there, people who cared about something beyond themselves. One of the volunteers, a woman named Rachel, asked me out for coffee. She was straightforward about it. I think you're interesting. Would you like to have coffee sometime? Just coffee, nothing serious unless we both want it to be. I appreciated the honesty. I'd like that. We met at a small cafe in Shrewsbury. She was an elementary school teacher, passionate about education reform, had never been married. We talked for 3 hours, covering everything from favorite books to life philosophies. When we left, I realized I'd enjoyed myself without overthinking it. So? Tommy asked when I told him about it later. Second date? Maybe. We'll see. I'm not rushing anything. Good. Take your time. You've earned it. Summer arrived, warm and full of possibility. I'd started running in the mornings before walking Max, got in the best shape I'd been in years. The lab work continued to be fulfilling. My social life had expanded. Tommy introduced me to his gaming group, and I discovered I enjoyed their weekly gatherings. Rachel and I continued seeing each other. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. We both had our own lives, our own interests, but enjoyed spending time together when we could. She met Max and he approved. She met Elizabeth and they got along wonderfully. I like her, Elizabeth said after they'd met. She's real. No pretense. That's what I like about her too. You going to tell her? About Christa? I already did. She appreciated the honesty. Said everyone has a past, it's what we do with it that matters. One evening in late July, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Worcester. Max dozed at my feet. Music played softly from inside. Life had found its rhythm again, different from before but good in its own way. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel asking if I wanted to check out a new restaurant that weekend. I smiled and replied yes. The past would always be there, a part of my story. But it didn't define me anymore. What defined me was how I'd handled it, how I'd rebuilt, how I'd chosen to move forward with dignity and purpose. Christa had made her choices, faced her consequences. Sebastian had gone back to his old life, probably not learning anything. But I had learned. About strength, about self-respect, about the difference between love and convenience. The leaves were beginning to turn again, fall approaching, the cycle continuing. But unlike last year, I wasn't dreading it. I was looking forward to it. To crisp mornings walking Max, to cozy evenings reading, to whatever new experiences awaited. I was free. Truly free. Not just from a bad relationship, but from the bitterness that could have consumed me. I'd chosen a better path and every day proved it was the right choice. Max stirred, looked up at me with those loyal brown eyes and I scratched behind his ears. We're okay, buddy. We're more than okay. And we were. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.